What we really want to do today is more like an ideological autopsy. Understand the deep-seated moral, political conflicts that really define this group.
Right. How did this organization, founded on this idea of careful stewardship, end up so fractured? You've got zealots, hoarders, even these warring authoritarian factions.
Exactly. And it all starts, really, with the trauma of their founding. We have to go back to Captain Roger Maxson and the Mariposa Rebellion. That's October 2077.
Okay, Mariposa. That's the military base, right? Pre-war.
That's the one. Maxson and his team were sent there for security, but what they found was, well, it was horrific. Scientists conducting FEV experiments, forced evolutionary virus, not just on animals, but on human prisoners, military prisoners.
Yeah, the sources really paint a grim picture. That wasn't just some rogue research project. For Maxson, it was like a fundamental betrayal, wasn't it? The government he served was creating monsters.
A complete moral break. He saw the leadership, the very people supposed to uphold civilization, actively working to destroy it from within. The records say he executed the chief scientist, Robert Anderson, himself. It was a point of no return.
And this is right before the bombs fell.
Just days. He declared secession from the U.S. government on October 20th. 3 days later, October 23rd, the Great War happens. Maxson then leads his loyal soldiers and their families out of the chaos, this long, harrowing trek to the Lost Hills bunker.
So they hole up in this secure bunker at Lost Hills. And that's where the Brotherhood of Steel as we know it really forms, around 2082.
Precisely. Maxson looks at the nuclear devastation and sees it as the inevitable result of, science without conscience. So the Brotherhood's mission becomes clear. Gather up and protect mankind's knowledge.
The idea being to prevent this kind of self-destruction from ever happening again.
Yeah, his famous analogy, and it's so key to everything that follows, is the Brotherhood as a hard shell around a precious seed. The seed is knowledge, technology, culture. The shell is the Brotherhood, guarding it until humanity is, I guess, mature enough to handle it responsibly.
It's stewardship, like you said. Not control, not dictatorship. He apparently lamented nuclear tech, wished it could be uninvented. So the original idea was passive protection, basically. Guardians.
That's the absolute core of it, passive guardianship. And that's why the whole history of the Brotherhood is so tragic, really, because it brings us right to the central question for this deep dive. Why did they ultimately fracture? Was it external enemies, the Enclave, the NCR beating them down?
Or was it something internal? Like, did their own strict rules, their dogma, this obsession with hoarding technology get in the way? Or maybe, paradoxically, did they only find real purpose when they broke those rules for humanitarian action?
That's the tension right there. Stewardship versus dogma versus mercy. That's the fault line that runs right through the Brotherhood's history.
Okay, so our roadmap today is going to trace that fault line. We'll start with the West Coast Brotherhood, see how they retreated into isolation, then jump to the East Coast with Elder Lyons and his pretty radical changes.
Followed by the backlash, the Outcasts, and then how Arthur Maxson tries to synthesize it all into this new militaristic force. So Roger Maxson, the founder, dies of cancer in 2135. His son, Maxson II, takes over. And almost right away, that hard shell starts getting, well, too hard. It starts sealing them off.
And it happened pretty fast, didn't it? By 2141, they make this huge decision about recruitment.
Huge, yeah. They decree the people worthy of saving knowledge were only the ones already inside their bunkers.
Wow. Talk about isolation. What did that do to them culturally, intellectually?
It's devastating, really. They became hyper-focused on the hard sciences, maintaining power armor, fixing laser rifles, the tangible tech. But the soft sciences, history, philosophy, ethics, even basic civics, that all started to wither.
Which is incredibly ironic, isn't it? A group founded to save all human knowledge starts forgetting the why, forgetting their own history.
Exactly. The sources mention that by the 2150s, you had young initiates who didn't even know who Roger Maxson was or why the Brotherhood even existed. They didn't know about Mariposa.
They're guarding the flame, but forgetting why fire was important in the first place.
Well put. And this ignorance fuels a subtle but really significant shift in their philosophy. It stops being about protecting knowledge for humanity's future rebirth. It becomes about, just surviving, outlasting everyone else. The idea became, we'll just wait until the savages outside wipe themselves out, and then we inherit the earth.
So Roger Maxson's idea of protecting people from dangerous tech twists into just hoarding it, keeping the best toys for themselves.
Precisely. Power armor, energy weapons, those become badges of status, restricted only to Brotherhood Knights. It's almost religious, this idea that only they are worthy. And it's not even logical hoarding.
What do you mean?
They focused entirely on combat tech. basic stuff needed to actually rebuild society, like civil engineering knowledge, advanced farming techniques. They ignored it, deemed it beneath them. Their definition of valuable knowledge narrowed down to just things that gave them military power.
So knowledge for control, not for rebuilding civilization. Did they actually forget the purpose or just become arrogant? Because that isolationism, that dogma, it seems like it left them totally unprepared for the real world outside the bunker.
Oh, they absolutely forgot the purpose, and they paid a heavy price when they ran into the new California Republic, the NCR. This is mid-2250s. The NCR is growing, forming a real nation, and the Brotherhood. They see this expanding republic not as a sign of civilization returning, but as a threat to their tech monopoly.
So they react how? Aggressively.
Extremely. They try to forcibly take advanced tech from the NCR settlements. It's the hard shell trying to crush the very seed it was supposed to protect.
And this kicks off the NCR Brotherhood War, which didn't go well for the Brotherhood, despite their tech advantage.
Right. Not at all. Sure, one knight in power armor could take out a squad of NCR troopers, but the NCR had numbers. They had industry. They could replace soldiers and equipment in ways the Brotherhood, with its closed ranks, just couldn't.
Logistics and manpower beat fancy lasers.
Pretty much. The Brotherhood got overwhelmed. They lost bunker after bunker, at least 6 major ones. And here's the kicker, showing how deep the dogma ran. They self-destructed 4 of those bunkers.
Wait, they destroyed the very technology they were sworn to protect, rather than let the NCR have it.
Yes, they'd rather obliterate priceless knowledge and irreplaceable pre-war tech than let the unworthy wastelanders, the NCR citizens, potentially use it to rebuild. It's the ultimate tragic failure of that original stewardship mission.
The cost must have been immense, not just in lives and tech, but politically, economically, too.
Staggering. The sources are clear that during the war, the Brotherhood specifically targeted and raided the NCR's gold reserves. They hit them so hard it destabilized the entire NCR economy.
Seriously, they caused an economic crisis.
A major one. The NCR government basically ran out of gold to back its currency. Trust evaporated. And that's when merchant consortiums, particularly from the hub, stepped in. They needed a stable medium of exchange, something verifiable.
And that leads to bottle caps.
Directly. They established a currency backed by a standardized measure of something everyone needed and could verify: clean water. And the most common, easily countable container for a standard measure of water was the bottle cap. So the Brotherhood's rigid dogma and military failure inadvertently led to the bottle cap standard across much of the West Coast.
Wow. So their internal failure had these massive ripple effects across the entire wasteland economy.
Absolutely. Their retreat into dogma didn't just weaken them, it fundamentally changed the post-war world in ways they never intended.
Okay, so while the West Coast chapter is basically self-destructing because of its own rules, something completely different is happening thousands of miles away on the East Coast. Let's talk about Elder Owyn Lyons. He led an expedition east in 2255.
That's right, sent by Lost Hills by the Western Elders, and his mission was pure Brotherhood orthodoxy. Go to the capital wasteland, Washington, D.C., recover any valuable pre-war tech you can find, and maybe see if there are any other Lost Brotherhood chapters out there. Standard stuff.
But the capital wasteland wasn't like California, was it? He walked into a very different situation.
Oh, completely different. He wasn't finding a region slowly rebuilding like the NCR. He walked right into a nightmare, a crisis that immediately challenged his mission and, more importantly, his whole moral framework.
And the catalyst was the super mutants.
The super mutants, yes, but not like the ones the West Coast knew. Remember, the Western mutants, the Master's creations, some were intelligent, could be reasoned with, even formed their own societies like Jacobstown. They were enemies, sure, but complex ones.
These East Coast ones were different.
Totally different breed. These came from Vault 87's unique FEV strain. They were relentless, brutish, mostly non-intelligent, driven by this constant, terrifying need to kidnap humans and dip them in FEV to make more mutants. They weren't an army, they were a plague, an existential threat.
So Lyons sees this absolute horror unfolding, the constant threat to the ordinary people just trying to survive out there.
And his priorities just flip. He sees the suffering, the sheer scale of the threat to human life, and he makes a conscious choice. He prioritizes mercy. Protecting the civilian population, the wastelanders, becomes more important than sticking rigidly to the Codex mandate about just grabbing tech.
He basically abandoned the primary mission.
He refocused it. He dedicated his entire chapter, all his resources, his knights, his scribes, to fighting the super mutants, to defending settlements. He even provided military support for his civilian rebuilding efforts, like Project Purity, as early as 2257. He put the pressure precious seed, actual human lives, and the chance for civilization ahead of just guarding the hard shell of technology.
And this wasn't just a temporary diversion. By 2276, he'd really changed the whole nature of his chapter.
Completely. The sources call it a purely charitable organization. They were helping people, providing security, asking for nothing in return. And crucially, he broke that decades-old taboo from the West. He started recruiting wastelanders into the Brotherhood ranks.
Opening the doors again? He must have realized that the birthright-only policy was a dead end.
Exactly. He saw that isolation meant extinction. If the Brotherhood died out, the knowledge died too. But you can imagine how this news went down back in Lost Hills.
Oh, I bet the traditionalists were furious.
Livid is putting it mildly. They saw Lyons prioritizing saving random wastelanders over retrieving priceless technology as him going rogue. A total betrayal of the mission, a betrayal of Roger Maxson's vision, or at least their very narrow interpretation of it.
It wasn't just a disagreement on tactics. They saw it as fundamentally wrong. Treasonous, almost.
Almost certainly. And the final straw, according to the records, came around 2277. Lost Hills gave Lyons a direct order, probably related to securing tech at a place called Fort Independence. Lyons refused. He likely saw it as diverting crucial resources away from the supermutant fight, away from protecting people.
And that refusal sealed his fate with the West Coast.
It did. Lost Hills cut him off completely. No more communication, no supplies, no reinforcements. The Capital Wasteland chapter was officially declared rogue, excommunicated. Lyons was left alone to fight his humanitarian war, proving that, in the eyes of the Old Guard, showing mercy was indeed a punishable offense. But the fight wasn't just West versus East. Lyons' radical shift caused a massive rift within his own chapter there in D.C. His move towards humanitarianism was just too much for some of the traditionalists under his command.
Right, this is where the Brotherhood Outcasts come in. They split off around 2276.
Yeah, led by guys like Paladin Henry Kasdan. These were the hardliners, the ones who completely rejected Lyons' focus on charity and protecting wastelanders. They saw his mercy not just as misguided, but as actual treason against Roger Maxson's original orders.
For them, it was tech acquisition above all else. Protecting people was a distraction.
Worse than a distraction, it was wasting precious resources, power armor, energy cells, personnel on people they saw as unimportant, maybe even contaminating. They clung fiercely to the Western interpretation. Find tech, hoard tech, preserve tech, full stop.
So they broke away and deliberately called themselves the true Brotherhood of Steel,
right,
or embraced the outcast label.
They definitely saw themselves as the true inheritors of the mission. They embraced outcast as a badge of honor, signifying their separation from Lyons' heresy. They were the keepers of the old ways, a conservative reaction to his reforms.
Where did they set up shop? Wasn't it Fort Independence?
Exactly. The very place Lyons had apparently refused in order to excavate. That's highly symbolic. It shows their absolute single-minded dedication to technology retrieval above all else. They immediately try to get back in touch with Lost Hills, basically saying, Lyons has lost it, you need to deal with him. Some sources even suggest they wanted him court-martialed, maybe even executed.
That's extreme. It shows how deeply they believed Lyons had betrayed the core principles.
It does. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit hypocritical. The outcasts were all about ideological purity, right? Sticking to the old ways, the strength of the Brotherhood Knight. But because they split off, they were suddenly very short on manpower.
Ah, so their own schism created a practical problem for them.
A big one. And how did they solve it? They started relying heavily on reprogrammed pre-war robots. Sentry bots, robo-brains, that kind of thing. Using machines to bolster their forces because they didn't have enough human knights.
Which is pretty ironic for a group obsessed with human military tradition and the purity of the Brotherhood soldier.
Hugely ironic. And their tech obsession went into overdrive, too. They weren't just after standard military gear. They were actively seeking out really exotic, advanced stuff. There are records of them recovering and studying alien technology from crashed UFOs, power cells, weapons.
Alien tech, seriously.
Yep. And also advanced Enclave gear, like the Mark II power armor. For them, the origin didn't matter, human, alien. Enclave, if it was advanced technology, it was valuable and needed to be secured by them. The object itself was paramount.
So the outcasts basically became this concentrated, almost fanatical version of the old Western Brotherhood dogma, hoarding above all else, viewing Lyons' fight against the super mutants as just a waste of time and good gear.
Precisely. They embody that internal failure, that hard shell, refusing to adapt or engage with the messy reality of the wasteland, even when faced with an existential threat like the mutants.
It's fascinating, though, that their strict adherence to the dogma, no recruiting, focus only on tech, actually forced them to use less traditional methods, like relying on robots and scavenging alien tech just to function.
Exactly. They ended up bending the spirit of the Brotherhood's traditions in order to rigidly uphold their narrow, literal interpretation of the Codex. It's a perfect example of dogma leading to contradiction.
So you've got Lyons trying to save the wasteland, the Outcasts trying to grab tech, and Lost Hills basically washing their hands of the whole situation. And then, just as things seem most fractured, the real boogeyman shows up.
Right. The ultimate irony, maybe the ultimate validation for Lyons, comes in 2277 with the major return of the Enclave.
The remnants of the pre-war U.S. government. And they were just poking around, were they?
No, this was a serious force, led, bizarrely, by a ZAX supercomputer calling itself President John Henry Eden, with Colonel Autumn running field operations. And they went straight for the biggest prize in the capital wasteland, Project Purity.
The water purifier at the Jefferson Memorial.
Exactly. The Enclave saw as the key to controlling the entire region, but their plan, especially Eden's version, was much, much darker than just controlling the water supply.
This is the FEV plan, right? The modified virus.
Yes. Eden intended to inject a tailored strain of the forced evolutionary virus into the purified water. It was designed to kill anyone with mutated DNA, which, after 200 years of radiation, was basically everyone except pure strain Enclave members. Ghouls, supermutants, most wastelanders, gone.
Genocide. Using the very symbol of hope and rebirth, clean water, as the delivery mechanism for mass murder.
It was pure, calculated evil, and Lyons saw it instantly. He declared the Enclave the greatest threat the capital wasteland has ever faced, and he made this incredibly powerful statement, totally validating his path. I will not allow the Enclave to control the one thing that could bring even the slightest spark of hope to these people.
So his mission, which started as tech recovery and shifted to fighting mutants, now becomes this desperate humanitarian defense against annihilation.
Absolutely. The fight for Project Purity wasn't about grabbing tech anymore. It was about saving everyone. And this is where Lyons' earlier choices really paid off. The Brotherhood, hardened by the mutant war, maybe bolstered by some of those wasteland recruits, spearheaded the assault.
And they brought out the big gun, Liberty Prime.
Oh yeah, Liberty Prime, the giant communist-smashing pre-war robot. Getting that thing operational was a huge gamble. But it worked. Prime became this unstoppable symbol of the Brotherhood's new role as protectors.
Smashing through Enclave lines, shouting anti-communist slogans.
Yeah.
It must have been quite a sight.
A turning point. It showed the Brotherhood wasn't just hiding in bunkers anymore. They were out there, fighting for the people, using the most powerful pre-war tech not to hoard it, but to defend civilization.
And they won. They beat the Enclave.
Decisively. They drove the Enclave out of the Jefferson Memorial. Then they took the fight to the Enclave's doorstep, hitting their main base at Raven Rock, destroying their command structure. And the final blow was taking out the Enclave's mobile headquarters, the mobile base crawler at Adams Air Force Base.
How'd they manage that?
They used the Enclave's own orbital strike platform, the Bradley Hercules, turned their own superweapon against them. Total annihilation of the East Coast Enclave's leadership and strategic capability.
Wow. So, victory. And presumably a huge technological windfall from captured Enclave gear.
Massive.
Yeah.
Vertibirds, advanced armor, energy weapons, research data, and crucially, the entire Adams Air Force Base facility. So ironically, Lyons' humanitarian war ended up fulfilling the original tech acquisition mission on a scale Lost Hills could only dream of. But it was justified by the context saving the wasteland.
He proved the hard shell was strongest when it was actively defending the precious seed.
Exactly. And then came the final act, the thing that cemented his legacy and the Brotherhood's new image in the capital wasteland. They got Project Purity working, and instead of controlling the water or charging for it,
They gave it away. Free, clean water, aqua pura.
free aqua pura for everyone. They set up trade caravans, protected by Brotherhood Knights, distributing water to settlements like Rivet City and others. They became the providers, the protectors, the force for stability and hope that Lyons believed they should be. His heresy was utterly vindicated by its success.
Lyons' victory was huge, transformative. But that kind of leadership is hard to replace. He died around 2278, and then his daughter Sarah, who took over, also died not long after.
Yeah, the period right after their deaths, roughly 2278 to 2282, the sources describe it as a time of ineffectual leaders. The chapter kind of lost its way, the momentum slowed, but this created a vacuum, an opportunity for someone new to step up. And that someone was Arthur Maxson.
The last descendant of Roger Maxson himself. He grew up in Lyons' Brotherhood.
He did. Started as a young squire, apparently quite timid, but the capital wasteland has a way of forging people. And Arthur seemed to consciously cultivate this image of himself as a prodigy, a warrior hero in the making.
The records list these specific feats, don't they? Killing raiders at 12, a deathclaw at 13.
Right, even got a distinctive scar from that deathclaw fight. And the big one, defeating Shepherd, a particularly nasty super mutant leader when he was only 15 in 2282.
These weren't just random acts of bravery. They seem almost calculated. Building a resume.
You could definitely see it that way. They establish his credentials as a fighter, a leader. And crucially, his lineage being a Maxson gave him legitimacy that maybe others lacked. It impressed people, maybe even got Lost Hills to tentatively acknowledge the Eastern chapter again, appointing him provisional elder.
And he used that momentum, that growing legend, to do something Lyons never could. Bring the outcasts back into the fold.
Exactly. In 2283, at just 16 years old, he pulls off this major political coup. He negotiates a reunification with the outcasts.
Now, what did he offer them? They hated Lyons' approach.
That's the genius of it. He crafted a message, a new vision for the Brotherhood that appealed to both sides. To the outcasts, he promised a return to military discipline, a renewed focus on technology, finding it, respecting it, and, very importantly, a commitment to eradicating abominations like supermutants and ghouls.
Okay, so that gets the hardliners on board. What about Lyons' followers, the ones who believed in protecting people?
For them, he kept the popular parts of Lyons' policy, actively fighting threats like the supermutants, providing security. But he framed it differently, not as charity, but as establishing order. He essentially said, we will protect you, but we will also be in charge. He blended the two philosophies.
It was synthesis, and it worked. They made him elder. The youngest ever.
Youngest ever. It marks this major turning point. He restores the reverence for technology, but he merges it with this aggressive, outward-facing military campaign. He explicitly adopts a new, more authoritarian path, talking about a nation-building role.
Nation-building. That's a huge shift from Roger Maxson's passive stewardship. And he used the super mutant threat to justify this expansion.
Absolutely. The supermutants were the perfect foil. They were still a very real threat, kidnapping settlers, even Brotherhood members. Maxson could constantly point to them and say, see, we need a strong, unified Brotherhood to cleanse the wasteland, to preserve our future. It gave his militarism a veneer of necessity, of righteous purpose.
Okay, let's talk about technology under Arthur Maxson, because his views seem quite different from both Lyons and the old hoarders, especially regarding things like synths.
Right. The Gen 3 synths from the Institute, indistinguishable from humans, potentially self-aware. Maxson sees them as an existential threat worse than the atom bomb.
Worse than the bomb. That's a strong claim. Why?
Think about it. The bomb destroys externally. Synths, from his perspective, destroy internally. They blur the line between human and machine. They can infiltrate, replace, undermine society from within. It's the ultimate perversion of technology, science creating something that threatens humanity's very identity. He literally says, science outpaced man's restraint.
So, for Arthur Maxson, it's not about hoarding tech or using it for charity. It's about control.
It's about active control and enforcement. His policy becomes, find dangerous technologies, synths, FEV research, advanced AI, and destroy them. Or, if useful, control them absolutely. The goal is to enforce its own brand of order on the wasteland.
And the tools of that enforcement become very visible, very imposing.
Oh, yeah. The construction of the Prydwen, that massive airship built at Adams Air Force Base, launched in 2282, that wasn't just transport, it was a statement.
Named after King Arthur's ship, right? Signaling this new era of dominance.
Exactly. It allows the entire Eastern Division to mobilize, to project power anywhere. Combine the Prydwen with Liberty Prime, reactivated and ready for combat, plus their fleet of vertibirds captured from the Enclave. This is the Brotherhood as a full-blown military superpower. The kind of centralized, technologically superior force Roger Maxson originally feared the old government was becoming.
And this power translates into actions that are, well, a far cry from Lyons handing out free water.
Definitely. We see evidence of things like requisition operations, Proctor Tegan, basically strong-arming settlements for food and supplies under threat.
So less protecting the people, more taxing the people.
It leans that way. The philosophy becomes much more transactional, more coercive. Maxson's Brotherhood offers security from mutants and synths, but the price is compliance, resources, loyalty. The sources quote the sentiment. If they aren't with us, they're against us. Non-compliance can mean removal of leadership. It's nation-building through military dominance, using technology as the enforcer.
Arthur Maxson really rebuilt the Eastern Brotherhood into this powerhouse, imposing his vision of order. But did that actually unify the entire Brotherhood? Did Lost Hills just fall in line?
Not exactly. His success in the East was undeniable, and it certainly earned him respect, maybe even nominal command over the whole organization. But the reality on the ground shows the ideological fractures are still there. The Civil War, in a sense, never really ended.
What about the original West Coast chapter, the ones who lost the NCR War?
They definitely learned some hard lessons. Take the Mojave chapter, the one stuck in Hidden Valley after that disastrous defeat at Helios 1 back in 2276. They were crippled.
Lost over half their paladins, right? Had to go into total lockdown.
Total lockdown. They survived by being ghosts, basically. Covert trading for supplies. And the irony, they got so isolated, so unable to risk patrols, they ended up using VR simulators to train new recruits. They didn't have enough real-world combat experience.
So while the East Coast is fighting giant robots and building airships, the Mojave chapter is playing video games in a bunker.
It's a stark contrast. And eventually, even the main Western leadership back in California had to face reality. Despite how much they condemned Lyons for it, by the 2290s, they started doing the same thing.
Opening recruitment to outsiders.
Yep. They finally admitted that the birthright-only policy was suicide. They needed bodies, so they compromised their oldest dogma just to survive. Pragmatism eventually trumped purity.
But they still pursued that goal of dominance, right? They didn't become humanitarians.
No, not at all. They used the new recruits to rebuild their strength and push for control. By 2297, they managed to seize control of Los Angeles, apparently after taking a fusion power plant from what was left of the NCR there. So they adopted Lyons' method, recruitment, to achieve Arthur Maxson's goal, regional power.
It shows how fractured and inconsistent the ideology had become. But are there even more extreme examples? Chapters that went completely off script?
Oh, absolutely. This is where you see the true extent of the ideological chaos. The most famous example is probably the Chicago detachment, the Midwestern Brotherhood.
They were considered rogue even before Lyons, weren't they, by 2277?
Yeah, they were always out there doing their own thing, largely cut off. And the path they took represents the absolute furthest divergence from both the Western dogma and Arthur Maxson's new order.
How so?
Rumors persisted for years, later confirmed, that the Midwestern Brotherhood wasn't just fighting mutants and ghouls, they were recruiting them.
Wait, recruiting super mutants?
Even intelligent death claws, according to some accounts. Think about that. Arthur Maxson is building his entire platform on exterminating these abominations to preserve human purity. Meanwhile, halfway across the continent, another Brotherhood chapter is welcoming them into the ranks.
That's mind-blowing. It completely contradicts everything the Brotherhood seemingly stands for, especially Roger Maxson's original horror at FEV. Why would they do that?
Survival, probably. Adaptability. In the incredibly harsh environment of the Midwest, maybe they decided that strength, loyalty, and useful abilities mattered more than genetic purity. They valued capable allies, regardless of origin. It's the ultimate pragmatic heresy.
So while Arthur is unifying the East under his banner of human purity and order, the Midwest chapter proves that the definition of brotherhood is completely fluid, completely dependent on local conditions and leadership.
Exactly. And you see hints of other independent groups, too, like a chapter mentioned out in Montana under an Elder Patroclus, seemingly operating autonomously. It proves the Brotherhood was never, and likely could never be, a monolithic entity. It's a collection of related but distinct faiths, all arguing over the true meaning of the original scripture.
The schism is permanent then, built into the very fabric of the organization.
It seems that way. Every chapter interprets the mission through the lens of its own experiences and necessities. So we've traced this incredible journey, haven't we? From a single founding principle to this complex, fractured landscape of competing ideologies. It might be good to just quickly recap those main philosophical currents we saw.
Good idea. Let's boil it down. First, you have Roger Maxson, the founder. His core idea was stewardship, right? The Brotherhood is guardians, the hard shell, protecting the precious seed of knowledge, staying relatively passive until humanity was ready.
Right. Then came the Western elders and the outcasts. We can call them the conservatives. Their philosophy hardened into rigid dogma. Isolation, hoarding tech for themselves, strict adherence to the rules, convinced only they were worthy. Self-preservation was key.
Then the radical shift with Elder Lyons, the reformer. His driving force was mercy. He prioritized immediate humanitarian needs, active aid, protecting the wastelanders, even if it meant breaking the old rules and sacrificing the tech hoarding mission.
And finally, that brings us to Arthur Maxson IV, the militarist, or maybe the restorer. His philosophy is order. He brilliantly synthesized elements from both Lyons and the conservatives, the active military role, the reverence for tech, but channeled it into this authoritarian nation-building project, using overwhelming power to eradicate threats, both biological like mutants and technological like synths, and enforce his vision of stability.
What strikes me is that the Brotherhood only seemed to achieve major success, like Lyons defeating the Enclave or Arthur unifying the East, when they fundamentally broke with Roger Maxson's original passive stewardship idea. They had to become either actively merciful or actively authoritarian.
That's a crucial observation, and it leads directly into what I think is the paradox of power at the heart of the Brotherhood story. They were founded to control dangerous technology, believing they alone could handle it responsibly.
The moment any chapter got its hands on truly overwhelming power, Liberty Prime for Lyons, the Prydwen, and the whole military machine for Arthur, they immediately used it to project force, to wage war, to impose their will. Whether that will was benevolent or authoritarian, the power itself demanded action.
Exactly. The technology that was supposed to be carefully guarded became the very tool of their transformation. It shifted them from guardians to gatekeepers, from stewards to rulers. Possessing that level of power armor, vertibirds, energy weapons, giant robots, seems to inevitably create an imbalance that pushes towards conflict and control.
It makes you wonder if Roger Maxson's original goal was ever actually achievable.
And that, I think, is the final thought we should leave with you, the listener, to ponder. Was that initial vision being just quiet protectors, waiting patiently for civilization's return, ever realistic? Or was the sheer power inherent in the technology they possessed destined to corrupt them? Did holding the ultimate weapons inevitably force them down the path of dogma, conflict, and ultimately trying to become the ultimate arbiters of the New World Order?
Once you have the power to shape the future, can you ever resist the temptation to use it?
A heavy question.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the long, complicated, and often bloody ideological civil war fought within the Brotherhood of Steel. It's clear the legacy of Roger Maxson, that simple desire to stop humanity from repeating its mistakes, became this incredibly complex burden. His descendants and the entire Brotherhood are still grappling with the consequences of wielding the very power he feared most.
Yeah, the struggle continues, defining what the Brotherhood is and what it should be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration of one of the Wasteland's most iconic and conflicted factions.
Ad Victoriam.